Hello, nerds, and welcome. We are crossing the Nerdverse, bringing you yet another episode. My name is Travis. I'm joined, as always, by my fantastic co hosts, Eric and Ryan. We are without Clark this week. I know that's going to disappoint some of our fans, but she is currently traveling for a wedding and will be joining us again, hopefully in the near future. How dare people get married and be happy? Jerks.
Enjoy life. Soulmates.
Classy.
Classy.
Well, in regards to soulmates, we are talking about Star Wars. There's all kinds of soulmates in Star Wars.
Star Wars is my soulmate.
And
I'm
every
not
one of those,
that big of a Star Wars fan. I am a big Star Wars fan, but I'm not.
and love
I'm
is
not that big.
love is the reason planets get destroyed. Take that,
I
love.
mean, that's one way to look at it.
That's a wild interpretation of someone committing a war crime.
I mean, Vader, all
Full
for
of
love.
war crimes. Like, so many war crimes.
Well, see, there
In
has to be
one
regulation of
self-contained
combat
suit.
before it's a war crime. So
Behind every great man is a great woman, right? Vader had Padme.
anyway,
Good Lord.
before we dance into dangerous territories and our TOS starts coming under fire once again, thanks, Eric, for that one. Looks like we are good on both platforms, so I
We
think
haven't
are
been hit
ready
by
to
a
rock.
single TOS violation.
No,
Yet.
I've been hit with those before, and I know
Yet.
what they look like. Yes, sir. Sony is quick with those emails.
Yeah. Anyway, so yes, walking in through, of course, guys, we are doing the next segment of our Star Wars May episode. We are sad to not have Clark with us, but we are going to press forward.
Yeah, I
So
think
you said,
we left
Travis,
off last week with Ryan absolutely destroying Eric in trivia, right? That was our last.
It's a true story.
Oh, but we do have to do the big three. So reading, watching, playing.
That's right.
All right, so Ryan, go.
Okay, so as far as reading goes, I've been making my way through kind of a backlog of Joshua Dalzell kind of micro novels. I don't even know what to call them. He's a novelist. He writes military sci-fi. It's good stuff, nice, easy reads, good little, action story. The heroes beat up the bad guy, kind of stuff, and I'm very much enjoying them. I'm making my way through Omega Force right now. I think I'm on book 17, 19, something like
Jesus.
that. Having a lot of fun. I am still making my way through the Sarah Moss books as well. But got to take a break every now and then, do some sci-fi. It's where my happy place is.
Respect.
As far as watching goes, so my watching and playing are going to be a little bit blasphemous for some of our viewers here. Because we are in May, we are doing Star Wars month, but the truth is, I've been jamming on Star Trek. I've been checking out the new season of Star Trek Discovery, as well as...
Nerd.
Super nerd. As well as making my way through the Picard TV show. Both of which are fantastic, by the way.
Picard is a great show.
Indeed. And so, as far as playing, I landed in a weird spot because I wanted to do some Star Wars stuff, and there's just not a lot of Star Wars gaming right now, right? And so, I did some Old Republic, and I played some Squadrons, and I'm chomping at the bit to get a hold of Outlaws, even though people are saying that it's not going to be as fantastic as I would hope it would be. And so I got on to Star Trek Online in order to do some spaceship stuff. And so for Star Wars month, apparently I'm doing Star Trek stuff to act as an emissary between the two fandoms, I guess.
All right, Travis, what do you got going on?
I finally managed to work my way through Wolf Time, which is book 3 of the Dawn of Fire series. Definitely a slower read than I had hoped, but we're past it now. I'm reading Dark Imperium because I don't want to feel good. I want to feel sad about the condition of the universe in Warhammer 40k. To top that off, I'm rapidly approaching what I feel is probably another one of the saddest moments in gaming, as I'm replaying Final Fantasy VII. For those of you I
Yeah.
won't. No spoilers for anyone who hasn't
spoilers,
played
yeah.
it, but definitely a big moment approaching on that one. Watching, I'm still powering through the Dressrosa arc in One Piece, which I feel like I've been on One Piece for a long time, but One Piece is also an absurdly long show, so I feel like a little bit of forgiveness in that regard.
Yeah, it's
What
got
about you,
some
Eric?
episodes to it. So I just finished Dragons of Fate, new Dragonlance novel. Really interesting. Has my favorite character, Raceland, in it. Probably the best mage in history. Maybe, well, Elminster and him kind of back and forth.
I mean, one's the chosen of Mistra, the other isn't.
I mean, but he does a lot, though. Raceland does take down a god. Without being chosen. But and then I'm watching Ninja Kamui, really good show, just finished up. There are no manga for that. Some people get confused with that. That was just a show that was on Adult Swim. Really good show. I love the fight scenes, the way they did it, where like the background's blurry and it's just the two dudes beating the shit out of each other or multiple, whatever. That was kind of cool and different, I thought, compared to a lot of other anime with some of their fight stuff. I also finished X-Men 97. Really good show. Excited to see where they
I've heard
go
really
with
good
that.
things about X-Men
I'm
97.
loving X-Men
Yeah,
97.
no, really good.
I think I'm 2 episodes from caught up. But
They just did the season finale and they already supposedly renewed it, but they say they renewed everything before we see it anyways. And then I started playing Starfield again because we have been talking Star Wars, and I needed spaceships and guns. So
yeah, I feel you.
Everybody's playing Star Wars adjacent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Star Wars
'cause,
adjacent.
well,
Yeah.
Well,
you
except
need
for me,
something-
I'm playing high fantasy meets post-apocalyptic future.
Yeah.
like I needed something with spaceships that I could shoot shit at other spaceships with.
See, it's actually that was me too. Is I wanted some Starship combat.
Yeah,
And
that was the
there's
biggest thing.
So little out there for that.
But don't want to make the commitment into getting back into Elite Dangerous.
And I'd
No,
have to put
that-
it to my PC. So
I would love to get back into that because that game is just above and beyond. But
oh yeah,
So,
still
that's
probably
so grindy. That game is so
Yeah.
grindy.
that's it.
It is
you
very
have to put
grindy.
time. It's a job.
Yeah.
It's a part-time job.
it's still
No, Ark
probably
is a
one of my
part-time
favorite. Still probably one of my favorite video games of all time. Elite Dangerous.
Oh, for
top
sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
For
top
sure.
5.
I love Elite Dangerous. I love Ark too, even though Ark's like the abusive
Yeah.
like relationship you keep going back to. It's like I could go back and play Ark, and then like 45
And
minutes
then it
in, you're
ruins
getting
your life.
chased.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting chased around the jungle by a fucking raptor.
Well,
Going
here's
like,
the thing
why
about
the
Ark,
fuck do the birds steal my canteen?
right? So with Ark, because I've called it the abusive ex-girlfriend for a long time, and what gets me is it's not just the bugs. I mean, Ark's a famously buggy game, right? And it's not just the difficulty of it, because it is an incredibly difficult game. It's the fact that it ruins your life. It's one of those things where suddenly you have 15 alarms on your phone to remember
Yeah.
to feed, to remember the hatching, to remember birth cycles, to like all this stuff, and it's like, oh man,
To go
I
check
thought I
for
was out.
eggs.
I thought I was out, and then I got a text message from Little Joe just the other day, and it was talking about the new Ark, Survival Ascended, is releasing 3 DLC packs, and they added vehicles to the game. So there is a
God.
coal steam engine train on Scorched Earth. There is an airship in Aberration that's a straight up steampunk airship. There's like Mad Max style post-apocalypse cars in Extinction, and man, God, it's pulling me back in. And the only thing stopping me right now is that the games have exceeded my rig. Like I have to upgrade all of my components to be able to use this stuff.
Starfield's supposed to be getting land vehicles, which would be kind of cool.
That would be a fantastic add-on for Starfield, because that's honestly, I think, my biggest complaint about the game is the fact that I'm walking, without exaggerating, probably 5 to 9 minutes in between locations on empty planets.
Yeah,
And so
the
You can get wildly exploratory like I do with open world maps. I'm just like, well, I'm supposed to be going east.
this is
What if I
east-ish.
went north for 4 hours?
No Man's Sky was great because you could just shoot through the ground, and then you could kind of like
Oh,
have
you're
some
talking about
fun
like
with it.
tunneling and stuff?
Yeah.
See, what I
At
liked
least you
about
could
No
make
Man's
it
Sky,
interesting.
and what I wish they would do with Starfield, even though I'm sure the logistics of it would be insane. In No Man's Sky, you can get in your ship, and you can like low altitude, low speed cruise, right? You have a very limited velocity, and I can just get in my ship and I can go a quarter mile and then put my ship back down. Yeah, it uses more fuel and more stuff and yada yada yada, but I can use my ship for transit. In Starfield, there's no in-atmo ship transit, right? And so,
Yeah, you have
what
to
you gonna
land at like pre-designated points.
well, and you can
But
choose like random landing positions, but
right.
when you're talking about the scale of a planet, because it's a true scale planet, in order to get to that building from orbit, either I have to have a ping or a marker to be like, okay, feed it into my nav computer and land at that building, or I'm kind of eyeballing it, which is a big deal because a large part of the game is base building and resource gathering and crafting
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. And so if you're wanting a spot where you can get both iron and nickel, and you do your resource scans and it's like, I need to hit that line, you can put down and be 50, 60 kilometers away from that line. And so it's a pain.
So we've gotten a little bit off topic with our continuation from our three things to start the episode.
That's okay.
But here we are back on
Yeah.
top.
Yeah, look how
well,
on topic we
yeah,
are.
we'll go with that. One thing I want to do is I just want to give a shout out in regards to like different companies and different people that are interacting with us. So I started talking to Survive. That's a board game one. We might look at doing something with that next.
Fantastic.
Ryan's already sold board games.
Sold.
He's in it.
Yep, done.
Yeah.
Well, because we were doing the Substratum protocol for a while. We might do another episode with that.
Yeah,
But
we
I think
might come back to that.
people have gotten an idea now, and I'll still definitely be putting them on our socials.
Dude, Substratum Protocol was so much fun.
Yeah,
I was so
absolutely
close
love
to
that
leveling up. I was taking all the risks. I was just like,
So-
I can roll some dice.
If there's other people out there that catch on and catch part of this, or if someone watching this knows companies or things like that, we'll definitely demo some stuff and do some things. So reach out, do that. We love to do different things.
Additionally,
So-
cutting in on that for subjects like this and for Substratum Protocol. For those of our viewers, especially the ones that watch afterward on some of the or listen on the podcasting sites and such, we want to know what y'all guys are looking for. And so if you're looking for more Substratum Protocol episodes, if you're looking for more content of that nature, be sure and drop us a comment, hit us up, email Eric and bug him. We want to hear from you, and we want that interaction, we want that engagement, and if the Substratum Protocol game to continue something that you want, fantastic, let us know. And that kind of interaction lets us know what y'all are wanting to see. Otherwise, the number of episodes for some of that might be kind of limited as we continue to work through the backlog, as it were. So be sure and give us that like, give us that follow, all that fun call to action algorithm stuff, and more importantly, give us those comments. Leave us those little notes, your opinions, and what you want to see.
Yeah, because we definitely want to interact with the community, especially doing other things with our episodes, because it's fun to talk about Star Wars or wrestling or like different like tabletop games. All that's
Absolutely.
fun, but it's always cool to kind of do something different. So we definitely are looking forward to doing different things like that. And a big thing with this survive game that I'm looking at, there's ways to interact with not being near each other.
Oh, cool.
So that's an upside to it. I just figured I'd surprise everybody all at once. Whoever's
that's
watching
fantastic.
and you all, with something like that. So yeah, that's probably the next special thing we'll do. Is probably something with that.
Awesome. All right, so as far as the topic at hand, now obviously y'all just listened to us go off about several of the sci-fi video games that we've been enjoying, right? We have things like Ark, and we have things like Starfield, and Elite Dangerous. Now, for me, when it comes to Star Wars, because we're in Star Wars month, right? My favorite thing about Star Wars has always been the ships and the vehicles, even more so than a lot of the Jedi mysticism kind of stuff. I love the ships. I love the vehicles. I love the tech, right? And so for tonight's episode, I wanted to go through and kind of have a discussion with you guys that is a little more interesting, maybe a little more personal for you two in particular, because I want to talk about the Star Wars universe militaries that we've seen employed. and maybe some inspiration behind it, or our personal opinions on some of the gear they were using or the logistics they were using. And something I'm interested in is what draws parallels from both of your experiences in the armed forces.
People that can't shoot.
So I'm glad we actually breached that pretty early.
I mean,
I
it's
was
not wrong.
I was never a great shot, but I always zero and qualled within like a couple. My hardest thing was always to zero. I always had a pain with zeroing. Usually 2 or 3 times, then I'd lock it down. I was never an expert shooter, but I will tell you, I was never the guy holding up the fucking range at like 1800 when everyone's trying to go have dinner. I was never the one out there, pling, pling, pling.
Yeah, so while Eric was mediocre, I shot expert fairly consistently. I think there was a few times where I just got marksman, but I was usually like anywhere between like 35 and 40, like consistently out of 40. So I would always have to go and help everyone else zero and then help everyone else qualify. To the point where I would call up which targets were going to pop up next when we did the pop-up range. I'm like, okay, start aiming at that 50-meter target. You're going to need the extra time. I'm like, go ahead and just waddle over that direction. Let's get
You'd
ready.
even
He's
see
gonna
people
pop up
like
3, 2.
extra rounds, extra rounds in magazines. Like, come on, bud, you could do it. It's supposed to be 40 for 40. Right now, you're 60 for 40.
we qualified one time with paper targets, and we had one dude, and I'm not going to name his name, but they put him between me and one other guy that were pretty, like, again, really good shots, and we made an agreement that like every 5th shot would go into his paper. I learned this because from a story from my grandfather when he did the same thing when he was in the army, right? Because nobody has an original idea. You just use what works, right?
Yeah, recycle.
So learned from Grandpa on that one. And so me and this guy were just like every 3rd shot, we were going to put one in one of his targets. I was going to take the left half of the paper. He was going to take the right half. Well, we get done. I shot like a 30. I think it was one of my lower scores. But it was just like a quick qualification when we got in country, right? Just to make sure everybody's zeros and stuff were good. This dude goes and turns in his paper. They're looking at it for a minute, and he goes, Did you use all of your ammo? And he goes, Roger. He goes, all of it? He goes, Roger. He looks at the paper again for a minute, and he's like, well, you shot about a 42. We would have to be there for like 9 extra hours for this dude to finish a qualification. The one time we needed him to miss every shot he hit twice.
It works.
He made 2 extra. We were just like, hit the big one in the middle. We'll take care of all the other little small ones. He got 2 extra shots in.
That Stormtrooper reference is definitely a real life reference also. Plenty of people.
Stormtrooper moment of all time still comes from the Mandalorian when they're on the bikes shooting at the can. And like that one's like shaking his gun like it's the gun's the problem, and I'm just like, oh, that feels real.
Well, we've all met those people, right? They can't accept anything that might be user error. Obviously, it's the weapon's fault.
As much as they miss, though, I've got to admit that it has to be something to do with the blaster and not.
Well, and I suppose we can talk about that because the Stormtrooper accuracy trope is something that has gone back and forth from hilarious to played out and back again many, many times. And there's all kinds of really interesting fan theories about the Stormtrooper accuracy, and there's 2 that I think I really prescribe to. And one is kind of the Star Wars catch-all answer, right? And it's the nature of the Force. If the Force needs something done, it's going to make it a thing. And so the Force protects it, and it's the equivalent of like an inbuilt plot armor, right? Where the Force needs these people to be at this place at this time, so nothing bad can happen to them. The other more interesting theory is that many of the Stormtroopers, especially following the Clone Wars, did not want the Empire to succeed. And so we're over the left shoulder shooting, so to speak. What do you got, Travis?
I have my own theory directly related to both Stormtroopers and the ones from the New Order. And it's the shitty helmets whose eyepieces are way too far apart.
Yep.
Like when you had to shoot in your pro mask?
Yeah. Like you're
Well, so
having to
here's
hold it like off to one side. Nobody has stocks on any of their firearms either. Everybody's just hip shooting, which is also a problem. Because it's not just stormtroopers, really. When you look at Star Wars as a whole, everybody like that leads me to think the blasters are just inherently inaccurate.
that's fair. Well, and so that's going to
Because
cover another
the
major Star
droids
Wars.
also miss a ton too, and like they should
Yeah.
be perfect. Like it should be a 1-for-1.
Right, the droids are a machine. Well, and that's an interesting point too, because as Star Wars fans and the larger fandom, there's huge arguments that we get into, right? One of them is the nature of the weaponry, because they call it lasers.
Obviously plasma based.
It's obviously plasma based, right? If it is a laser, there's no kind of like kickback. There's no kinetic transfer, right? You would have no reason to have a stock except for aiming quality, which we do see on certain weapons. You know, you got the EE3 carbine that Boba Fett is really famous for using. It was an EE3, right?
I have no
that's
idea.
Got a stock,
Yeah.
and an extremely short barrel. But if it's plasma, if it carries some kind of mass, I would imagine it would have some kind of kinetic transfer. But I don't know.
I don't know. The disintegration rifle also had a stock that the
that's true.
Mandalorian used.
Yeah, Mando's
But I mean,
disintegrator.
Yeah, I think inherently it's the weaponry
Okay.
more than anything. That's going to be my gamble because it's like I said, it's not just the stormtroopers. The clones, like accuracy by volume, stormtroopers accuracy by volume, droids accuracy by volume. The Rebel Alliance and all of their like myriad of blasters, it's all accuracy by volume. Like you're just
except in vehicles.
Well, but here's the
Fair.
interesting part about that. To Travis's point, one of the key factors about Star Wars, especially when we're just dealing with like the film eras, right, is that the technology in Star Wars has been stagnant for hundreds of years. You're talking.
It's
you
also
can find
like all over the place.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Everybody's been using the same template. It's almost like in 40K, where it's like, okay, we figured out this type of rifle works. Never mind innovation. Never mind working on new stuff. Make 30,000 of these and send them to the troops. And in Star Wars, that's very much the case. Like technology stagnated, and there are a handful of planets that are different, but not many.
That's probably because of the way the Empire's running it, though. Like that would be my guess as to why they wouldn't continuously do improvements on things.
But then they would be the only ones with inaccurate weaponry, right? Like it's literally everybody with the blaster can't hit the broadside.
No.
Barring a few exceptions with like custom-made stuff, like Han Solo's blaster, highly customized, right? He's an ace shot with it. Yeah. Which honestly, like stats-wise in all of the RPGs, is a trash firearm. Like it's so not good in all of the games.
No, horrible.
Well, as far as like the tabletop games go, I should say stats-wise.
The video game, it's not that great.
And so that's actually going to wrap back into a point that Travis, me and you talked about a couple days ago when we were talking about the topic for tonight's episode. And that's the fact that the way that Star Wars portrays stuff, especially in its video game and RPG like tabletop iterations, is backwards. Like if you really look at it, it's bass backwards. Because you look at some of the most famous ships in Star Wars. Of course, you have makes and models, right? You have the X-Wing, which we'll get into later. We have the TIE Fighter with the twin ion engines. We'll get into later.
The A-Wing.
And then we have the YT-1300 freighter, the Millennium Falcon.
One of the most famous ships, which is just some dude's souped-up weed van.
It's a weed van. It is literally an 18-wheeler truck. It's a flatbed, and in nearly every video game, in nearly every tabletop RPG,
up jingle truck.
Yeah, they show the Millennium Falcon as this crazy powerful ship, and even in the novels, they tried to justify it with some hand waving, like, oh, the modifications that he did and the adjustments that he did basically turned it into this super machine. It was never that. Like Han Solo is a great pilot, and Chewie's a great mechanic. But that ship is a bucket of bolts. It is hot garbage. This is not some sleeper hot rod that's down at the track pulling eights. Like,
so the thing is, like with it, like specifically in the Han Solo books, they talk about it. It's like, well, they ran into a problem, so they fixed the problem by changing some of the components. Well, none of the components are for like YT series ships.
Yeah.
So they all have to be kind of like hammered into place. So it's electrical system, which is why you always see so much steam when something breaks in the Falcon, how it was explained back in the novels, as to why there's fewer sparks and more steam is that it's liquid conductors because
Yep.
he got EMP'd once. And
Fried
so in
everything.
order to avoid being EMP'd or taken out by ion cannons, he replaced everything with liquid conductors.
Guy's a genius. That's why it's the best ship ever.
No, guy's not a
His-
genius. He's a
no.
jury rigger. He
Yeah.
fixes it with duct tape, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
but
like,
he
it's held together
outperforms
by duct tape
everybody.
and dokes, and it's because he's the best. Like, it's because he's an amazing pilot. That's the only reason. Like, that thing has a massive engine system that it shouldn't have. It has weaponry stolen from like an Imperial class like
Yeah, he's got
interceptor ship, which
quad
is what
laser
those quad
turrets.
cannons are.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's literally running an overclocked computer. Like, it does
it's a
some
ship.
things really great, but then none of it is gonna last very long.
It's a ship that no one else can fly because he's broken it so many times, is what
Yeah.
it is. And that's actually one thing I think that the sequel trilogy got right, is they showed somebody else took control of the Falcon and made real attempts to try to fix it, and guess what? It was hot garbage. And they put in different kind of components, which are supposed to be stock, standard components on these freighter ships, and it broke the damn thing.
Yeah.
And
It's because none
Yeah.
of the components that were in it were supposed to be in it
Were
originally.
supposed to be in
Like,
it.
there's nothing about that that's like a YT class anything anymore. If you go by like the
what's
lore.
the story about like the ship of Solomon, or the whatever, where it's if you take a ship and you replace the masts and put new masts
Oh
on,
yeah,
then
like
you replace
it's
the
still
hull.
the same
and-
ship.
Is
Yeah,
it still the same ship?
it's
Because
not.
I mean, not even the ablative armor is on there anymore. He blew it off during the Kessel Run, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's got literally exposed sections that he's never bothered to put paneling
I
back on.
love the running gag of the dish always being a problem.
I
Because
mean-
you see it get knocked off, right, in Return of the Jedi,
Yeah.
and then that became a running gag in all the novels that he could never keep a dish on it.
Which I
And
love.
so in all
like,
the
that's
novels, yeah,
fantastic.
the dish was getting blown
Comms
off.
are
or, like,
always
he'd-
going off.
Yeah, he'd clip it on something and it'd go flying off.
But again, it's another great military metaphor due to the fact that how many times did you have to jerry rig equipment? Like
Oh,
our
that's exactly right.
generator and
like
and
officially,
of course not officially,
Not
but
never
like
officially.
I mean our fire base
I was in
only
charge of our
ran
maintenance
because
logs. I'm not going to admit to anything in this conversation.
yeah, well,
Well,
I wouldn't either. But
and
like
to wrap
our fire base only worked because some guy could literally like he thankfully took some electrician classes and he kept
Right.
that shit running. Shout out to him, by the way. But like if it wasn't for that, they were like, well, you'll survive. And it's like, no, we won't. We don't have anybody to do this. We just got lucky. They didn't know he was there.
Everyone's seen Armageddon, right? With Bruce Willis and
Of course.
so I think it's Armageddon. But I
Talk about the
digress.
Russian components.
when they get to the space station, and that guy's just beating on stuff with a wrench, screaming Russian components, American components, all made in Taiwan, and he's just beating it with the wrench. That's
Well,
legit
and
how a lot of things got fixed.
here's the other thing about trying to draw the parallels, right? One thing that I learned very early on, and I want to make this very clear to everybody, I've never served. I've never had the honor of serving. I get a lot of interesting information because many, many of my friends have served. And the one thing I learned very early on is that the term military spec, mil-spec, or military surplus, means the opposite of what people think it means.
Made by
Because-
cheapest bid.
Yeah, made by the cheapest bid in the worst way possible, as fast as possible. That's what mil-spec is. And so, I used to have a buddy. And so shout out to Nooner. He served in the Army. I want to say he was a Bradley commander or something similar to that. I don't remember the exact details, but he had some stories that are very similar to yours, Eric, where apparently the engine on the Bradley, like, nobody knew how to work on it or had a diesel mechanic or anything that was attached to it, and so there's just one guy in the unit that learned how to do it by reading some books, and so there were stacks of like manuals that were just in his Bradley all the time, in case something broke. And that's kind of what I see with the Millennium Falcon, because he took a YT-1300 freighter, which is the equivalent of like it's a flatbed truck, right? It's a box truck.
It's a solid.
It's
a
a
jiggle truck.
fine
It's
ship,
100% a jiggle
Yeah.
truck.
but it's meant to take giant boxes full of stuff
Yeah,
and move
it's
them
cargo.
over there.
Yeah.
That's what it does. That's why it's a freighter, right? It was not
Yeah.
designed for maneuverability. It was not designed for speed. It was not designed for fortitude to take laser fire. It was not designed to be an armored transport. You're talking about it's a truck. It's the Dead Reckoning from was it Dead by Daylight or whatever. And yeah, he tweaked it and he made it cool and he added some aftermarket stuff.
I mean,
But
yeah,
there's only going to be so much maneuverability you're getting out of a mail truck, you know?
yeah, like I think the engines and the armor plating were all put on by Lando when it was supposed to
Yeah.
be this hardcore like spice smuggling machine.
Well, and Lando liked it because it was the YT-1300 series. There was 10 billion of them, and
Yeah,
it blended in everywhere, right? It's just a Mac. And
So all I could think of is the robot chicken Star Wars. Who's they? What's an aluminum falcon?
what's an aluminum Falcon?
No, you get you and that light bright chest piece that's back to the office right now.
So I will say one thing I was looking at in regards to when we brought up this topic for logistics and comparing it to the military and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I am slightly surprised. Like if you read, like I know they're not canon, but if you're like the books and stuff like that, how many ships they had and how much equipment like they had in the Empire, but like during like any interaction, even in the books, they still only used minimum forces everywhere they went. Like,
Oh yeah. Well, and that's going to be something
come on, there's
going
like
forward.
thousands of star destroyers. You could have brought more than 4 to that fight. Like,
Oh yeah. Well, and here's the big thing.
The
Here's
thing
what
is,
we
like,
have
the galaxy's
to.
a big place, right? Like, when
Yeah.
you're trying to run a totalitarian government, you literally have to be everywhere.
Well, and what we're going to have to do moving forward as we kind of examine
Space
a
is
lot of
also
this
big.
is not just is space big, but we have to look at what the lore says and what the kind of world building says versus what we saw in the movies. Because as you remember, the original one was shot on like a shoestring budget. Half the aliens in the cantina were just masks from the costuming department that they had extra lying around. You're talking
And one man in a NASA outfit.
Yeah. And you're talking a lot of the stuff that we take as tropes as part of the universe now happens just because of the nature of the film, right? These are films that were intended for kids. And that's what Star Wars is. It's intended for kids. It doesn't matter that the stormtroopers can't hit anything. They were the scary bad guys, and our heroes barely got away. Whereas when you get into the books, I agree with Eric. I think the books were a great source of a lot more detail about what we had going on. And it's way more than we're going to see in any of the films. We're starting to get some of it with some of the newer Star Wars content, like The Mandalorian, like Boba Fett, like Ahsoka, like Obi-Wan. But we don't see a lot of it in the films primarily because that's just the way that they were filmed, right? They had a
Ben
limited budget.
Kenobi?
I gotta bring up one thing. So Michael said in the chat, a YT-1300 is equal to a C-130.
So that's not a bad comparison, Michael.
That's a
but
decent
here's
comparison.
the thing: the C-130 is a massive piece of equipment. Like it hauls a bunch. The YT-1300 hauls like maybe 10 people at most. And so you're talking about the same function as a C-130, but without any of the size comparison.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say the 1300 probably has less cargo space than like a C-130.
Like if I was going to draw a comparison to the
I'd be
YT-1300 to an actual piece of military, it's going to be a Puff the Magic Dragon style chopper, like the what were they called? The ones they used in Vietnam, right? That were basically just normal helicopter that they could fit 15 people in.
I mean, I think a fair comparison would probably be like maybe a Chinook.
A Chinook.
Like if we're gonna go helicopter, because like it's both cargo and personnel.
Yeah.
Crews.
Well, and
the crew complements about between like 3 and 5.
Yeah. You look at a C-130. When you up armor a C-130, you get the AC-130, right? And so you get the armored cargo. But with the YT-1300, yeah, you can put some ablative armor on it. That's what Lando did. He did the extra plates and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess in space, the mass is less of a issue until you try to bring it in Atmo. So, okie dokie.
That was always explained away by the grav thrusters, which, by the way,
Yeah.
was finally used in a Legends novel in a way that I 100% agree with.
They light something on fire?
Absolutely not. No.
Oh, not as cool then.
I believe it was man, I think it was during the Yuzon Vong War, and Han and Leia were trying to escape pursuit, and so Han flew into a asteroid field, and Leia was like, "What are you doing? We nearly died last time it happened." He goes, "Yeah, but I have an idea." And so, since there's no friction in space, he would just go bottom down to an asteroid and then fire his grav thrusters, like his anti-grav
Throw the
thrusters,
rock.
as hard as he could, and throw rocks everywhere.
Yeah, throw rocks. I mean, aiming with that would be a crazy. I mean, I
Can
guess he's
you
got the
imagine?
computer, so
Things in an asteroid field are inherently chaotic. Could you imagine adding additional force to already spinning and semi-stable rocks?
right.
Because it doesn't matter how big they are, right? You hit them with the anti-grav blast, they're just going to go flying and bounce into other rocks, which are then just going to go nuts, right? Like, it's just going to create
Oh yeah, it's
a
kind of that
massive amount of chaos.
that whole theory that if you're ever it was an old Western movie theory where if you're in a gunshot, shoot the people, don't shoot the horses. Dead horses cover. Live horses, 2,000 pounds of
Chaos.
panic.
It's Firefly.
Yeah.
It's an episode of
Yeah,
Firefly.
it was Firefly. That's what it was. Yeah.
Great Western, nonetheless.
Space Western. Space opera.
Western. All right, so talk about things that surprised me. I am going to go into our first kind of topic as far as the military goes. I want to look at the Republic military, specifically the Republic Armed Forces, because I learned something new today that I didn't know. And bear in mind, I've never looked into the High Republic or anything like that, right? And so I learned that the Republic military only existed during the Dark Age. After the culmination of that era, they were disbanded around 1032 BBY after the Jedi Sith War.
Yes.
And so that means the entirety of the Republic functioned off of the Jedi as a peacekeeping force with a handful of, like, I guess peacekeeping forces, right? Like just MPs, effectively.
Yeah.
Well, each planet had their own army still. If
Yeah,
I'm
they
not
had
mistaken.
their militia and their garrison.
So each planet did. So like if called upon, like then they probably would. What's that big fancy word? Amalgamate or something into one big military
Amalgamation.
force. Yeah, I used a big word, by the way, so
the
I get
problem-
like
Nicely done.
$2.
The
But
problem with that is that who is then is in charge? Who answers to whom? Which planet gets deemed the most important?
oh yeah, I
see,
don't
which
think
is
that's
which is why that droid army was such a huge threat
Yep.
initially, because there was no organized and/or standing army.
Well, and you
No.
start looking at the separatist crisis, right? What we view as the Republic military, more specifically the clone military that fought for the Republic during the Clone Wars. The only reason that they needed that is because the separatist crisis, when planets started rebelling against Republic oversight and Republic taxation, it was those very militias, those garrisons that were meant to be part of that amalgam task force that started turning. And once you have 3 planets on your side, every other planet, you could just be like, okay, well, it's 3 of us versus you. You can join or die. And now they have a 4th and a 5th. And that's how the separatists even got to be a thing. And for one, they never talk about this. I think a huge component to the separatists' military leading into the droid army, right, was that the planets that had the means of production said, we can fight this war at no cost of life. We'll do it with machines. And I think a bunch of planets heard that and went, sweet,
Money. Oh,
Yeah.
money.
until that ship got blown up and none of the droids moved anymore. Take that,
so-
trying to fuck with the Force.
well, they
Right.
fixed.
They
Later
fixed
on, they
that.
fixed that.
Yeah. They
covered
decentralized
that
the
in
control.
cartoon. Mhm.
And so let's talk about the separatists. So that was our first, as far as the movies go,
robots ever.
worst robots ever. Like, not all of them. The commando droids were pretty cool.
Droidekas were cool.
Yeah, the droidekas were pretty cool.
That's
Neat
true,
idea.
Droid Cuz. The spider ones that could transform either like from a spaceship into a walker on the ground were pretty dope.
The
if I'm
vulture
being perfectly
droids.
honest. Vulture droids. That's the one I was
Yeah.
trying to think of.
I think that honestly, for me at least, is the most impressive piece of tech that we saw from the separatists. Is they had the vultures, and so you're talking about an interceptor class starfighter that could grapple in space, travel in atmo at unbelievable speeds, and then land and become a walker unit for
Ma-
territorial denial all day.
Yeah, their
not
cheap
legit.
mass-produced droids were Garbo, man. The Roger,
yeah.
Roger, like
Yeah, the was a BB-1. I think it's a BB-1.
But
Droid.
you can't mass produce those other ones though. Like
Yeah, too expensive.
not at the like mass that the Empire needed. That's why if you look like all their stuff's so clunky and whatever, it's because it's probably the ATST and the AT-ATs were probably dirt cheap to produce.
Well, I have two theories on that, and one is Travis's theory from earlier. I think that was the Separatists' biggest weakness, is that space is huge. Like, space is big. And so when you're
Space is
trying
big.
to control a whole bunch of planets through force of arms, especially through occupation, there's no way you're going to manufacture that kind of material.
You
right?
can't. It's just not feasible. Not without like
And yeah,
centuries of planning.
The Separatists only lost because there's the Force, the Jedi's. That's it. There's no other reason. They would have won if it wasn't for that.
No, here's the truth. And I mean, I guess spoiler alert for a
Well,
20-year-old movie
I
now.
mean, yeah,
but
technically the Separatists were never going
they
to
were
win
never
anyway
going to win.
because they were a puppet of
Yeah, but
Palpatine.
I mean,
you
they were
gotta think
designed to fail.
They
every
were, but
major
they still
victory that
would've.
they had, every major move that they ever did was carefully organized by Palpatine. It was a farce. It was smoke and mirrors. They never actually won. Palpatine made it look like they did.
Yeah. It was
and as
two,
far
it was
as-
two people conducting a war that they didn't know was a pro wrestling match. Like the
Yeah.
outcome was already predetermined. They just didn't know.
And so you're talking about, why does things look clunky when you start talking about the Imperial material, right? Like, you're talking TIE fighters, you're talking the ATSTs and the AT-ATs. My theory on that is that they are designed to be modular. I think that they drop them on the planet in boxes, and the stormtroopers bolt them all together real quick. It's like those big sheets that you see the Jeeps used to like come on. Almost looks like a sprue from Warhammer. That's what I think that their military equipment is. All right, here's your box of bits, and you bolt it all together, and you go into town. That way they don't have to worry about assembly, right? You're just mass producing pieces and shipping them where they need to go.
Actually, I hadn't thought of that, but that's a fair point, though.
yeah,
and I think TIE fighters are the same way. I mean, here's your cockpit,
Dude, I'm sorry, TIE fighters
stabilizers,
are dope.
engine.
TIE
mean,
fighters are
Don't get
dope.
me wrong, they're fantastic, and there are several types of TIE fighters that I think are exceptions to that. Right, the TIE Defender is an amazing machine.
The Interceptor is
The TIE
dope as hell.
Interceptor, amazing machine. When you look at the TIE Fighter, though, the mainstay starfighter of the Empire, that is a cockpit, an engine, and stabilizers. Like, there's nothing else to that.
yeah.
It's which is, I mean, it's all you need, right?
Well,
And
I mean, all the people are literally clones.
Yeah.
Like they're not worried about them. Like they don't care.
they are
like,
an
they could
expendable
just
resource.
they just keep throwing them at you. It's not until they've conquered the galaxy that they stop using clones, and it becomes an
They
issue.
They also ran out of source material, so the clones were becoming degraded.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and with the
Is
advanced
also a
aging,
contributing factor. Yeah.
you got a couple of decades out of them, and that was about it. That's been a major component in a lot of the new stuff, right? Is what happened to the clones after the rise of the Empire. And the fact of the matter is, Empire didn't want them.
Nope.
They didn't want clones. They wanted
Vader
much more.
kept his a lot longer than any other like Imperial unit.
You had the
with
fists.
The 501st. Yeah, the fist.
Yeah. And that actually kind of talking about the 501st. We're trying to get an interview with a buddy of ours that is part of the 501st charity group.
Robbie.
It's organizing. It's proven a little hectic, but I will share this little bit of inside information. So I have made efforts to join the 501st a couple times myself, with Robbie being kind of a mentor of mine.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make an officer, right? Because that was one I always wanted to build. Is I wanted to get an Imperial officer together. Your Tarkin style characters. And it turns out their primary job when you're out, and I forget the term he uses, when you're out doing stuff for the 501st, right?
Yeah.
They are handlers for the troopers to help them see and help them walk around.
Dude, I told you those helmets are garbage.
Yeah. I've got to examine some of Big Rob's buckets that he's built and that kind of stuff, and it's crazy. And when you look at them in the movie, unless they have some crazy high tech where you're doing the whole like screen projection HUD stuff, you can't see nothing out of them bloody helmets. And yeah, there's no way.
Well, I think that gets actually brought up in one of the movies where Luke like leans in to talk to Han. He's like, I can't see anything out of this.
Right?
I mean,
So maybe it is the helmets. Maybe that's why stormtroopers are terrible shots, is because the helmet's awful.
I do love the SNL skit where they just get glasses and then they can shoot. I think that was
Oh, that was
SNL.
pretty funny. That was solid.
That was the best.
I've seen
All
that
right, so
skit.
let's talk about some of the gear that we see the Separatists use. Right? Obviously, we talked about the BB-1.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Is it BB-1 droid, battle droid?
No,
Standard
you're
battle
thinking of
droid?
that little tiny droid thing.
No, that's BB-8.
Well, I know it's
BB-8,
BB-8, but I think
I
you're
think it's
thinking
just
of that.
B1. Maybe it was
I
just a
thought it was like
B1.
BE1, maybe.
But so that was your mainstay trooper, right? And you're talking about a minimalist robot. They had a vague AI. They had an appendage to hold a weapon. They had a motivator in the form of 2 legs. And that's it. You're talking no body armor, no nothing, just a standard carry this rifle and shoot at stuff.
And they did have fear. They did know what fear was.
Well, so that's actually a complaint that I have because
It's one that I
When-
have too. Like, I hate
you
the fact
watch-
that they were afraid of shit.
you watch Phantom Menace, right? 1999. We see a terrifying army. Their mainstay unit was a robot. It didn't feel fear. It didn't have pain. It didn't have any of that jazz. It carried its rifle and it shot at stuff. That was what it did. And I
Yeah, it's
love
just
that.
a B series battle droid.
but
yeah.
it had emotions. They had. I think they had true.
And then without any kind of explanation, along comes episode 2, and suddenly they were talking to each other and smoking cigarettes by the cooler and being really afraid of Jedi.
they developed
yeah.
sentience.
So there's
Well,
actually
it went along.
here's
they did.
here's the actual explanation for why that happened, because I went diving on it. The actual explanation for why that happened is because they became terrified that the AI that controlled the droid armies would eventually slip the control. And so they needed a way to motivate and control an AI. And so they actually programmed the ability to feel pain, feel fear, and all this kind of stuff. They gave them control edges over their army in case they ever broke loose direct command control. The theory that I read actually posited that it's the exact same thing on why C-3PO acts the way he does, where he feels frustration, he feels fear, where he can be tortured in Cloud City. It's all a control aspect because they didn't trust computers and programming.
Makes sense.
I don't like it. I wish they'd have stayed Terminators, right? Like,
Yeah, I have to
I
side
think-
with Ryan on this one. They were way cooler when they were just an unfeeling, like, marching.
yeah, I
Inevitable
wish they were
machine,
just
right?
Terminators.
I kind of liked it. I thought it was funny.
I
mean,
mean,
it made no
it
sense,
added
but-
levity, right? Like,
Yeah.
which
It
is
did
fine.
add levity.
Like
That is true.
I don't know what levity means, but like it was funny.
Humor,
It added funny.
lightheartedness.
It got rid
Oh.
of the tension, right? Like, and it gave them a way to have those
Fancy
funny
words.
scenes, like the droids going no as they're getting cut in half by lightsabers. Because Jedi, without that kind of humor overlay, without the right soundtrack, so to speak, right? They're a terrifying thing. They are a terrifying force.
Dude, read the High Republic books, like in regards to what the Jedi
Oh,
Order
God,
was,
well,
and it is
Speaking
so
of
much
droids that were
different.
terrifying, can we talk about the sabotage buzz droids that they would just launch at you in space?
yeah.
And why those weren't utilized more?
The buzzy droids, yeah, that's a
Yeah,
terrifying
That
aspect.
just rip ships apart. Like they
Well,
had
they get into
plasma
vital
cutters and then a little
components and-
drill that could just ruin
Yeah.
everything. That's terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying.
It was
So on the
probably
subject
very
of-
difficult to build those though, because of all the little.
It couldn't have been that difficult
Intelligence
because
it
they
had to
launched
have
about
with it?
40 of them per missile and only about 5 landed.
So here's the thing. When we talk about the buzzy droids, we saw them employed extensively against only one type of target, and that was
Yeah, the
against the
Jedi.
Jedi. And so I think they probably were very expensive, and that they saved them to be like, nope. Because let's look at what Jedi did. Let's flip the script and let's start looking at some of the clone military stuff, right? You're talking about an actual tactic on the battlefield was to take an entire platoon of clones and you march them behind a Jedi. A Jedi with a lightsaber out front acting as mobile cover, almost like the way they used tanks in World War II. This Jedi would not let any fire come down on this platoon until they were in the right position, and then they moved out and laid down fire accuracy by volume. Jedi were terrifying. They were an invincible, untouchable enemy that I guarantee you the Republic propaganda engine painted as absolute demons on the battlefield. And I think that's what's happened with the Buzzy droids, is that's a Jedi pilot. Throw the big stuff at them.
Yeah, because they were the only ones flying A-Wings.
Oh,
Those
they had
weren't
the Aether
A-Wings.
sprites. They
Well,
were
not
Aether Sprite.
A-Wings.
Aether
Those were
Sprite Jedi
ETs.
Interceptors.
Yeah, they were the Jedi Interceptor was the precursor to the TIE Fighter. That's why they sound so similar. Like their
Yeah.
engines, because both of them are still ion-based engines between the two, just to get super technical about our fantasy.
Yeah, our you know, the same stuff that a bunch of, you know, old men sat around in a room one day and went, what could be cool about this ship?
My big question with all of this stuff, because again, you see it used so commonly, and I'm wondering why it wasn't employed more, because it's fairly common, and that's ion disruption fire.
Well, and that's funny because you see that in
A
all
lot.
the video games. You see
Yeah.
it in all of the like miniatures games, the X-wing miniatures games.
Yeah.
Ion's a major deal. You see it in the cartoons get used as a super weapon.
Yeah.
And a standard issue for a clone trooper, your bog standard CT-0000 clone trooper, had a fragmentation grenade and an ion grenade meant to disrupt systems. The only thing I can think of to defend that in the movies is that it made the combat boring. Right? They wanted World War I style Red Baron dogfights in space.
Which, I mean, you can still get that, because, like, when you see it employed, it's always fairly slow, right? Like, it's not ever moving as fast as, like, say, a blaster bolt, or any of the other myriad of weaponry that gets employed. It's fairly slow by comparison, right? But again, like, you see it on the Escape from Hoth. They're firing it from the base into space. And, of course, they're targeting their large targets, right? The Star Destroyers. I would be equipping every space frigate I had with an ion cannon, just in case.
Well, and it is possible, it occurs to me, especially when you start looking at the Hoth battle, right? Because you're talking, during the Hoth battle, the Empire's been in play for a while. They've been dealing with the Rebel Alliance for a while.
Yeah, like 20 plus years.
Yeah. I'm wondering if it turned into kind of an old school bootleggers arms race, where it's like, okay, we have laser cannons. Well, we have shields. Well, now we have ion cannons. It's like, okay, well, now we have magnetic sheaths or whatever, right? Thank God we invented the whatever device, where they're not as effective. And so you start,
Yeah, like it would have to be something as to why they weren't employed.
Yeah.
And I still think that, like, with their shields up, I'm pretty sure that ion is still useless, because you can't use them on droid decals.
That's true. You got to get
with
get
shields
inside
up,
the
so
bubble.
shields have to be down, and shields also have to be down for, like, landing craft and stuff to go out, which is a pretty common theme in most sci-fi. That if you're going to be doing any type of transport, obviously shields have to be down.
Gotta drop the shields.
Well, yeah, because then what if you run it? Because, like, it shows in the show that the shield is in fact also a physical barrier, because
Yes.
ships would crash into other ships, and if their shields were still up, it would just be an explosion on the outside as opposed to, like, a serious impact. Which is why it's significant when that one A-wing loses control and just smashes into the bridge on that
Yep.
Super Star Destroyer, because its shields were down. They had already blown up the shield generator on that one.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
we have to talk about the Z95 Headhunter. That was a clone ship,
talk
wasn't
about
it?
precursors. So the Z95 Headhunter was actually a mass-produced starfighter meant to be used by garrison planets. They were originally
designed
shipped
for
out.
the clones.
No, they were originally shipped out to like planets on the Outer Rim and stuff for their garrisons. Now, the Z95 being the precursor to the well-known X-Wing as adapted by the Alliance to Restore the Republic later.
ARC 170 was the clone one.
Yes. Now, the ARC 170, that was a purpose-built ship for the Clone Army.
Yes. Also similar
so-
to the X-Wing.
Yes. It's actually an amalgamation of the two that led to the X-Wing. Because what the Rebel Alliance wanted was the resiliency and consistency of an ARC 170 with the nimble capabilities and ease of production of a Z95 Headhunter. Because that's the kicker with the Z95 Headhunter. You could make 1,000 of them for $1. Like, they were crazy cheap. They were crazy easy to build.
They fast.
And they're fast. In fact, used by racers all through the Outer Rim. And so the X-Wing took those two concepts of, okay, we need something like a Z95 that functions like an ARC 170. And they ended up with the X-Wing. And the big innovation for them, and this is where I bring up the stagnation of technology, the big game-changing innovation for the X-Wing was that it could switch modes. It could extend its foils to go into a more maneuverable but slightly slower combat mode. And that was the big, like,
Or
breakthrough,
close these
right?
foils and go fast.
Go fast in a straight line. Which,
Going super, super fast.
when it comes to Star Wars, we have to hand wave a lot of stuff, right? Star Wars Outer Space does not work like Outer Space does.
No.
It just doesn't work that way.
Can we also
Otherwise,
talk about how lame the Naboo starfighters were, like by comparison to a lot of other
Yeah.
starfighters?
I'm not a fan of the Nubian SF1s.
Dude,
they-
they're booky. Like
I don't care for them.
like
Like
they're
their
so
design
doo-doo.
makes perfect sense when you think about it, right? I want a super fast, super maneuverable ship that can trans-atmo
Yeah.
at the blink of an eye.
Sleek and low profile. I get it.
Yeah, that's what
Well,
it
low
was designed to
profile is
do.
also harder to hit, but
Yeah, and so I can see why they designed them that way. Aesthetically, not my favorite thing ever.
my biggest problem is like you're putting the cockpit against center mass, which is where everybody shoots at, right? That's not like the greatest of designs. That's why you
Right.
see cockpits in modern military vehicles are at the front, right? There's a reason they're at the nose and not in the dead center in the middle.
Well, and that
the engines
again-
are huge, bulky, and on the outside, which leads to speed, right? But also runs into a problem of easy to
Targeting.
hit. Like, there's nothing about that screams, we care about getting these back.
yeah. Well, and the kicker is we can apply logic to that, with their design and the sleek kind of nature of it. Realistically, they did it because somebody on the design team thought it would look cool, right? You're
Oh, they
talking
look-
about,
They looked neat, like, and they
Yeah.
did look sleek, but like,
but you're
from a
talking about
practical
nearly
standpoint.
everything designed for Star Wars is designed for aesthetic, not for function. They wanted it to feel like World War II. We want dogfights. We want
yeah,
big aircraft carriers. We want all this kind of stuff because there's no reason for a Star Destroyer to have a bridge on an easy to target little neck that overlooks all of the surface. There's no reason for that. They run
no, it should be
everything
in the
off of
middle.
sensors
like,
anyway.
yeah, there's-
Like, you're not going
They
to
just
look out
wanted
of
to
a
look through the
window from your
window.
ship and be like, "Yep,
You
we're the
are.
bad guys. Sure are. We should shoot that way." Like, you're not going to
I-
eyeball anything in space.
That
Michael
just shows
McKay,
how
like,
big
he's in
your
the Air
balls
Force.
are.
Do you guys just look out the window when you guys do stuff? That's how everything's done, right? And the Air Force is just kind of like peek out and then be like, a little more left, Bob, and then they just kind of.
And so, no, you're talking about everything designed for Star Wars, especially for the original trilogy, was meant to emulate World War II and World War I technology in space. That's what it
Yeah.
is. It looks cool. It made for a very entertaining movie and great space battles. It's not realistic
Yeah.
at all. Like, it's just not. They use tablets. There you go. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
And so, yeah, if you're looking at a Star Destroyer, cut the bridge off of that little extender. There's no reason to look over your ship. You tuck that nice and safe down as a CIC in the middle of your giant armored wedge,
Yeah.
and you use your computers and your cameras to do everything.
Also, the wedge shape is a fantastic design, in my opinion, for space battle because you're always maximizing your
Your frontage.
Yeah, you're always maximizing your frontage because if you're chasing something directly, your guns can still reach from back to front going forward, especially if they're on a really wide gimbal
Yeah,
mount.
like a gimbal.
And if you're doing broadside, it's also good because as that again angular triangular shape, anytime you strike something on an angle, there's a chance of a glance, right, or lower
Mhm.
penetration rate.
Absolutely.
So
And so
again, that wedge shape from the profile on the side where you have that angular deal is also a good design until you get to the bottom. And then you
Yep.
look at the bottom of the Star Destroyer and I'm just like, there's nothing
Well,
down here.
No,
like-
it's nothing. It's
I'd be
open
hanging
space.
out under here and just, just
Oh, yeah.
straight up. And then
Well, and that's the whole picture. Like, they wanted their Star Destroyers to form a picket line, right? Because obviously there's lines in space for whatever reason.
yeah, there's definitely up and down. There's definitely up and down in space.
And so then you have a maximized frontage of Star Destroyers that are holding. But you put one starfighter underneath it, behind it. What are they
It's
going to
pro-
do?
Yeah, it's a problem.
Like, yeah.
Deploy a
But-
shit ton of TIE fighters.
Just deploy a shit ton of
Well, I
TIE
was gonna
fighters.
say.
Exactly right.
That's what they did was the TIE fighters.
And so, okay, we're going to go to the animated series here, the Clone Wars animated series here. There is one particular episode that I think is fantastic for this discussion.
Is it
And
the one
that's
where
when-
Anakin gets his really wildly unpractical ship that has
Yes.
the spinning wing all around? God, I
Oh
fucking
no,
hate that
not
thing.
the spinning wing thing.
Oh, I
So-
hate that thing.
There is an episode where General Grievous is aboard his flagship, the Malevolence, and it's a prototype droid ship that they had custom built under his specifications. And it's a terror. And it's a terror because, as Travis brought up, it's got an ion lance. It's not an ion lance. It's an ion
not a
net
lance.
caster.
Yeah,
It has a thing that shoots out an ion net, and it can recharge and do it over and over and over again. Absolute terror to fight with any kind of capital class, right? Anything Corvette or larger isn't going up against the Malevolence.
Nope.
And so Anakin gets in a prototype ship, and I forget the name of it, but it looks like a sewing needle. It is super long, super narrow, and has a cloaking device. Which, as we all know as Star Wars fans, no ship that small has a cloaking device.
Except all these small
Except
ships
for
ended up with
all of 'em.
cloaking devices. And none of the big ones, which was weird.
Yeah, like we never saw a cloaking capital ship. Like, I would love to see the logic behind no ship that small has a cloaking device, because it's got to be a power generation thing. Like, oh, it uses astronomical amounts of power, but they're so small that you would think they would use significantly less.
The
Like,
Millennium Falcon could pull it off because he had overclocked
oh my God,
engines.
yeah, freaking Millennium Falcon. So I'm gonna
Literally generating so much power that
Yeah.
he caused his own errors. He was blowing up his own ship by going fast.
I'm gonna reveal to
The
you guys
Ricky
right now
Bobby of space.
why I have a hard time with Legends, and why I am actually really glad they got moved to their own category. In 80% of the Legend novels that I read, they suffered a major problem, same as most Star Wars. Like, it's what it is. But I constantly, even as a kid, got frustrated that because Han Solo flew the ship, that made the Millennium Falcon the best thing ever. Because these kids were related to Luke Skywalker, that made them even more powerful than Luke, or even more powerful than Han, whatever. All of the ones that were tied to the main cast were superstars with incredible powers and capabilities, and were capable of great things and all these galaxy-changing affairs. But nobody talks about, like, Phil the Engineer. And that bugged me. It bugged me that the Millennium Falcon, for absolutely no reason, was considered one of the most powerful ships in the galaxy. Because it's not. It was never meant to be. You're talking Han Solo was on a BFE planet, and everyone that ever sees the Millennium Falcon is like, what a piece of shit. And I can't stand the fact that because it's Han Solo and he got popular, suddenly the Millennium Falcon is the most powerful piece of hardware in the galaxy. It bothers me.
There was a lot of luck involved too, though. Like, you get the lucky
Yeah,
thing.
like, Han Solo's
there's so much to
Entire
that ship.
superpower was being wildly lucky.
Yeah, I mean that
And
was
also
the
being like a
Force
really
looking
good
out for him.
planet.
Yeah.
Or pilot
Well,
planet. Really good
but I'm-
pilot.
Yeah, really good pilot. But it's the same thing with all of their kids. Every single kid they had was a superhero. All of them.
Yeah,
It bothers me.
Yeah.
a lot of shows and cartoons and things do that, though.
I
Yeah.
absolutely agree.
That's actually a super common trope.
Super common trope. I'm 100% with you. And it bugs me every time.
Oh, see, I don't mind that just because I don't know, it's hereditary. I don't know.
If we get into metachlorians, I swear I'm going to lose it.
No, it's not that. It's just like if you look at
Evil
it
bacteria.
Evil
If you're-
bacteria.
if you're super powerful with the Force, like your kid's probably going to be attuned with it more than you because
But see, that's not the way the Force works. I know they keep showing it that way. That's not the way it's supposed to work. You know what the
But-
Force is in Star Wars? Force is the active destiny of the universe.
I mean,
There's nothing in you that makes you special. It chose you to do a thing. You get great power in exchange for free will. That's what the
I mean-
Force is.
then it makes even more sense that like because those kids are going to do great things that their parents did. So if it's all about future anyways, then obviously those kids are going to be huge linchpins to the future because their parents were.
Well,
Like so that
only-
makes it even more sense that like they're super powerful because the Force is going to need them to do things.
Yeah, but the Force
It-
could do
it
the
is-
exact same thing with literally anyone in the universe.
But it's
Yeah, but
also
the-
established in lore, both modern and legends, that The Force
It's
runs in the
hereditary.
family. It's hereditary, right?
It absolutely is. You look at all the books, it was the same way. You look at Kylo Ren. It's hereditary. All of them. They definitely show where it's something in the blood.
Oh, Kylo
Right.
Ren was so underutilized. It still makes me
I
sad.
agree.
He was my favorite Sith.
So here's my thing about it running somewhere in the blood. The Kaminoans, if it's in the blood, if it's hereditary, could have just made infinite Jedi.
No, because magic bacteria.
Yeah, it's just limited
No,
number of
I
evil
think they-
bacteria.
I think they cover it by saying that there's some sort of difficulty in the DNA to get a
Right,
clone
well,
of a Jedi.
Even
There's
when you
some
look
sort of-
in the Bad Batch TV show, which I love, a large part of the arc is trying to figure out the whole cloning shenanigans, right? And that's what they're trying to do is clone force sensitivity. I mean, minor spoilers. It doesn't really cover anything. And it just doesn't work, and they can't figure out why. And so that's the explanation we get, is that it doesn't work.
I mean, you get that explanation in a lot of like sci-fi stuff, though. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
There's some
I mean,
stuff
you're
that
dealing
just
with
doesn't
sci-fi.
get an explanation. Yeah.
And I can live with that. In fact, I can live with that in Star Wars. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't bug me, but
It's super honestly, so there's two things in Star Wars. One of them is a Legends issue that bothers me a lot, and the other one is a modern canon issue that also bothers Ryan a lot. And we're talking about tactics in the military and the resistance and yeeting a ship into another ship with
Oh,
hyperdrive engines. I hate that. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it.
I hate it.
What?
Okay, so here's
Because
the
there's
thing.
no explanation.
Yeah.
And if that works, like if that's a thing, why are we not strapping hyperdrive engines on rocks,
On
and
asteroids.
big chunks of steel, on random debris
So-
floating in space? Like if it's that easy,
Yeah.
why is this such a weird thing that this person did?
So I did a deep dive, and actually, Travis, you spawned this on. We had a conversation several episodes ago talking about the Galactic Empire versus, right? Because as nerds, that's where our brain goes for whatever reason, is who's going to win in a fight.
Yep.
You know, we know Eric backs Pikachu the whole time. Hey, this episode's my fault.
It is.
Oh wow, yeah, you brought Pikachu up first. Ooh,
this
bad
episode's my fault.
Ryan. Ooh,
He would win though.
you in trouble?
So I started a
Pikachu beat
deep
the shit
dive
out of Darth Vader.
into what happens and what do we know about major sci-fi military forces. So I
Yeah.
looked at the Empire, I looked at Starfleet, I looked at the Klingons, I looked at 40K, including the Tau, which have a whole other problem with faster than light travel, for the record. And ultimately, here's the conclusion that I came to. Star Wars, when it comes to their technology and their equipment, are inferior to nearly everyone, including Stargate, with one exception, and that's hyperspace.
Yeah.
With hyperspace, Star Wars has some of the fastest travel in sci-fi. And it's all hand-wavy, right? Nobody really explains it on why you can get from one end of the galaxy to the other in a number of hours. Like, it's the fastest travel in sci-fi.
Yeah.
But they have a drawback. Because in Star Wars, you have to stick to hyperspace lanes. Carefully monitored.
Like the webway.
Yeah, carefully monitored roads that you have to stick to. And traveling outside of those roads is impossibly dangerous because flying through things with gravity or mass is a problem, which is why the Kessel Run is such a big thing and how they retconned a mistake with the term parsec into a really interesting story. And so what I think happened when they threw that ship against the other ship in the sequel trilogy, which drives me nuts, they sacrificed hyperspace land. They made it impassable.
That was the only thing I could think that would explain that away.
Yeah,
As to why it
wouldn't
wasn't
it be used
But
more?
again, like when they drop out of hyperspace before like they close in for a battle, because there's sometimes where they drop out of hyperspace and then they're not in a hyperspace lane. They're like right next to a planet. Again, why are we not yeeting ships into another ship? Like,
Oh yeah, well, especially when you deal with some of the villainous organizations we have. You look at Prince Zizor and the was it Black Network, the
Black
Sun.
Black Sun.
Black Sun. Prince Zizor would have no problems going full terrorist and burning hyperspace lanes to the ground.
Yeah,
Zero issues with that.
Zero problem.
And so I don't know why it's not used more. Now that that's officially canon, that's how that worked.
Well, they did it. They
Like-
do it. They do it in the High Republic. So there's a pirate group that have figured out how to like come into hyperspace lanes and things like that, and it's actually a pretty good read.
And that's in High Republic, you said?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to check out the High Republic. It sounds cool.
Because there is technology that yanks people out of hyperspace, which again is also cool, but also like effective, right? Like essentially gives you a blockade to stop people from doing stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Which-
in the new High Republic books, the pirates actually go into the lanes, like, and it's some craziness, like, in regards to that, because they've got a special character and all these different things to map out extra stuff. So it's actually pretty cool. Because in the beginning, like during High Republic, the lanes they have are even fewer for traveling than they do like in most of the movies we watch. So
See, and I can get behind that.
That's my gripe with modern canon.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing.
My Legends canon gripe comes from actually the Solo book series.
so good.
And he has this state-of-the-art interface repair droid. Right? It's designed as a box. It opens up. It has the little supercomputer that plugs into the Millennium Falcon that speaks the Falcon's language, right? They communicate with one another in the book perfectly. They're in sync. This droid is just this super high state-of-the-art, massive repair droid. And at no point in any of these books do they explain where the hell this thing went.
Just forget that happened.
Han probably just got rid of it because he's like, I'm gonna fix it myself.
Why?
Well, it's Han.
It's
Either
Han
he
Solo.
broke it or he lost it in a card game. Like,
yeah,
He
like
spaced
I would
that
just
thing.
like some sort of explanation as to like, yeah, he lost it in a card game. Fine, I can buy.
I can live with that. Yeah.
Right? Like that fits character. Or he used it to pay off some weird debt that he had accrued. I could believe that.
Yeah.
But like we just go straight from him having this supercomputer on wheels that could fix all of his ship's problems to I don't know how to fix my own ship, and it sort of just flies on its own. And I don't understand. Like, there's just nothing to gap these two situations. And I'm like, I just, even if it was like a 10-second blurb where it was just like he was in a shootout and it got shot and exploded, I'd been like, bad luck, right?
Yeah.
He probably just
Fine,
got
it's
mad
gone.
and kicked that shit out of the fucking lock, dude. He was
'Cause
like,
it's
fix
Han,
it myself.
It's not.
No,
It's not what he would do. He was so lazy.
No, yeah,
That's
he was
another thing that
incredibly
people
lazy.
get so
Like,
wrong about Han
But-
Solo. Is
yeah,
like
but
this
see,
dude was a slacker. He was not going to fix shit by himself because he had a droid that he didn't have to pay that would just do it.
He loved fixing his own ship.
No, he did
No.
not.
He did in the books.
That's why
he did.
Chewie did most
That's
of it.
why Chewie did it all.
Oh,
Yeah.
Chewie did a lot. No, he did. I'm not saying he didn't, but like Han hated when other people fixed a ship. That's why he did it, or Chewie did
No,
it.
Han hated when other people inspected his ship because they critiqued his work because he had a
Yeah.
very fragile ego. That
Yeah,
also
like-
gets covered in the Legends books.
Yeah,
You
oh,
do
yeah.
not take criticism well.
No, he
Well,
even
that's
eventually
where-
goes through an alcohol problem because of it. Yeah, no,
Well, here's the
guy's
thing.
crazy.
When it comes to Han, Han is one of the most popular characters in Star Wars, right? I honestly think Han Solo is probably
Yeah.
more popular than Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
But
agree.
it's
Yeah.
because he's relatable. We've all known a Han, where
Yeah.
they're incredibly lazy. They have an incredibly fragile ego. They are
But they're
prone to,
massively
bouts of-
lucky.
but they're massively lucky. When the sequels came out, and the first thing we learned is that Han and Leia split up, I went, yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
That tracks.
Yeah. I'm
Like
with
that.
you.
You're talking about a guy that can't handle being critiqued by someone who enjoys critiquing. Like,
Yeah. Like. And so
doomed
yeah,
to
and
fail.
don't get me wrong, I love Han too. I think he's great. I love his stories. In fact, I feel like I'm one of the only people that loved his movie. I thought Solo was great.
It was fine.
Yeah, it was all
It
right.
was fine.
Yeah, I thought it was cool.
Like I B
But-
minus.
I love the fact that he's real, right? He has problems, and I think that's cool.
Yeah, my
mean,
favorite
even-
thing was him not being able to listen to orders and then became general infantry, and I'm like, that also tracks.
Yeah, that
I
tracks.
I wish they'd have gone like into his like Legends lore, because when he was part of the like Corellian fighter squadron, is dope. Like,
Yeah.
There's
Absolutely.
a reason why he had the blood stripe on his pants, like that. Like lore established was this actually really high Carillion honor because he was this massively good pilot.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this applies to several characters. You look at Anakin, right? Darth Vader. You talk about this dude was dramatic. He liked being the center of attention, and he
Yeah.
never had to try his entire life. Everything was easy for him.
He used the Force to make his cape move.
Yeah, like you're talking about flying a TIE fighter with the Force so you can stand on top of it with your cape billowing dramatically as you enter. Like, dude was extra. And
Yeah.
when you watch him in the
Dramanican.
Dramanican. When you
High
watch him in the
midichlorian
animated
count.
series, even when he's in battle, it's the same way. He's never stressed out in battle because it's easy for him. Because he's the chosen one, right? Everything goes exactly his way because it has to. And so he's never had to try ever. He's kind of
Yeah,
spoiled.
well, it's also been like that. Like when you're told you're perfect and you run into that
Right.
confidence thing of like, well, I'm never gonna fail.
Yeah.
Which,
Why
but,
try?
like when he does fail, he takes like a massive fucking hit
Oh,
to his
yeah.
ego, like that fight
Well,
with
and he's
Dooku.
out for days, right? Like he
Yeah.
sulks, he broods, which is how sexy men pout, for the record. And so yeah, you
Dramanican.
start looking at those characters, and I think the best ones all have those obvious personality flaws. And I think that's
I
what
do love humanizing characters. Like
Yeah.
it does. It makes it so much easier to connect to them. I hate when we try to overhumanize villains, though. Sometimes it's okay to just let a bad guy be the frickin' bad
Yeah,
guy. Like
let the Joker be the Joker.
Yeah,
like,
I don't need a redemption arc for some of these dudes. Let them be scumbags from the start, and like I'm fine.
Absolutely.
I'm fine just hating this person. I don't want to have any sympathy for the bad guy in certain situations. It's fun every once in a while, like Loki's little redemption arc to where he was like sort of good but still mostly a scumbag. I was mostly fine with that. I had some issues, right, in the MCU. But there's some stuff where they're just like trying to talk about like the tragic backstory of like evil Sith person X, and I was like, I don't need his
Yeah.
tragic backstory. I just need to know that he's a terrible person. Like,
some of the
let
Sith,
him be a bad guy, and like let's just move on.
yeah, some of the Sith, they were put into place without any need for a redemption arc. Darth
Yeah.
Nihilus will
Yes.
never get a redemption arc. Darth Nihil will never get a redemption arc.
Palpatine.
Palpatine.
Everyone before Darth Vader will never get
Well,
a
I think
redemption
because
But they
Revan was a
do.
Darth, and he had a full
he got
redemption.
a redemption arc.
Oh, I always forget Revan.
What's her name? Is it Traya, the old woman from
Yep.
Knights of the Old Republic?
Darth
She had a full
Traya.
redemption arc.
Yep.
Bastila Shan falls to the dark side, has a redemption arc.
Oh,
Yep.
but if you go that way, like with her, like she didn't start out.
But she
though.
became a Darth. But I mean, not every, but most of the Sith start off as a Jedi.
Yeah.
A lot of the original Sith don't.
Yeah. Now,
If
talking
the
about
original
Old
Sith were
Republic,
like a bloodline, that's getting way, way back. But like
Yeah.
your
Well, that's what I'm
average
talking about. Like
interaction,
Yeah,
though, is just a fallen Jedi becomes a Sith.
a lot of them before Darth Sidious were.
well, you're talking about Darth Sidious. You're talking about a Sith. What was his name? Instigated the Rule of Two.
Bane.
Darth
Is it
Bane?
Yeah, Darth
Bane.
Bane. Darth Bane institutes the Rule of Two, which was
Yes.
a major propaganda move on his part to get rid of all of his rivals. Had nothing to do with anything to do with the Sith, because the Sith had whole planets and academies and stuff just like the Jedi during the Old Republic.
Genius move.
And so
That was
Darth Bane
full of
comes
fallen
in.
Jedi.
Darth Bane comes in and he says, "Nope, there's two. There should only ever be two. Me and an apprentice in case I die." And it was genius. It made sure he was incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And then
Consolidation of power.
But
a
it
1,000
also
years before Yavin, the Jedi win, the Sith are eradicated, and out the
Yep.
window they go, until Sidious comes across, what was it, a Datacron or the texts or something, and rises to power again.
But if you look at it, he did a smart thing though, because every time you watch a movie with villains, usually the villains destroy themselves. Like anytime like all the villains team up in like DC or
Yeah.
Marvel, they always end up destroying each other. So there's only two of them. It's really fucking hard to fuck each other up. Like
That's true.
Revan and Malik is the one example where it doesn't work. Because
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was
Malik
before
fucks
the
Revan up. But like
that was
if you
before
look
the
at
Rule of Two, though, wasn't it? Because there was still
No.
Sith as
Yeah,
a
Darth
species.
Bane was... Because
I
you're
think
talking about
maybe it
Darth
was
Bane was
before
at the...
Revan. But there was so many
I'm
dark Jedi
Furiously Googling.
yeah,
during the
well,
Revan
see,
series, so that has
during
to be
Revan it was
before
Dark
Bane.
Jedi. But,
Right. Which is Sith.
Well, so when you're getting into the Old Republic, there were many Dark Jedi that fled to the Sith, but you also had plenty that were taught the Sith ways without ever belonging to the Jedi Order.
Right.
Because they had the temples that were originally built by the Sith species that later became a whole creed thing, and so there were Sith who were never Jedi, but you're talking 10,000 years ago.
But I mean, like, again, regardless, there was a lot of infighting. Like, even in Legends, there was a ton of infighting from the Sith.
Yeah.
So the Rule of Two also essentially eliminated a lot of the infighting, but also eliminated a ton of their, like, upfront power.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not throwing 8,000, like, evil Jedi into the galaxy. You have 2 that are then having to manipulate and mastermind things kind of from the shadows because they're outnumbered, 500 to 1.
They did a good job, though, just the 2 of them, Sidious and Vader. They took them all out.
Sidious.
Well, you're talking.
Vader was chaotic.
Vader
evil.
didn't
Vader
do
was
shit.
a fucking baseball bat. Like
he was an instrument.
Sidious didn't even do most of the planning. His master did. His master set up most of that stuff. He just was in the right place at the right time to eliminate him and then take over.
Oh, yeah, he's genius.
Right, which is the
so
Sith
you're
way.
talking.
When you become strong enough to replace your master, you then become the master, right?
Well, you're talking Darth Sidious. When you look at it, Palpatine was the most powerful Force user that ever existed. And I'm going to say that for one reason specifically. And that's because he was incredibly powerful, but none of the Jedi could sense it.
Yeah.
He could keep that locked away. And if you
That
start
shit
looking
on
at
wraps.
it, that's an incredible thing. And, it's portrayed kind of poorly in the films, but you're talking this dude out of nowhere gets accosted by 4 Jedi Knights. One of them is Master freaking Windu, who's one of the best swordsmen of all time.
Yeah, like actually the top 4 duelists in the Jedi Order went after him.
Because you're talking, it was Mace Windu, Kit Fisto. I can't remember
Master
everybody.
Kit Fisto, and then the 2 other knights that were both exceptional swordsmen, and they get bodied for free.
Yeah, in 2 rounds. It's nuts. And
What happens when you're a good guy and you don't just attack right away?
Should have brought Yoda.
Should have just fought him
even
right
Yoda.
away.
If it had been Yoda and Windu against him, though, that dude would have been aced. I'm sorry, you're not beating that combo.
If Mace Windu just would have fought him instead of talking first, he probably would have won.
Well, but bear in mind,
the Jedi way is to arrest.
Well, not just that, because Windu was ready to put that dude in the dirt, right?
Oh,
he was
100%.
going for it. I personally believe, and I can't prove this, I personally believe Windu was being compelled by Anakin. I think it was a force thing. I think Anakin got into his head and stopped it.
Oh, see, I don't.
Well, that also leads credence to the theory that Palpatine's great only because you know how Harry Potter only uses Expelliarmus, right?
Yeah.
Palpatine only knew 1 force power.
Lightning.
No, it was the mind trick.
Oh yeah.
He could use lightning, but that wasn't the power. Because it gets into it, it's why would Anakin just suddenly start believing this guy out of nowhere? And it's because he would use the suggestion a little bit at a time.
Well,
until it built up and he had full control.
Anakin, though,
which makes a lot of sense for Palpatine.
He had no self-confidence, though, from day one. He doubted himself from day one.
Bullshit.
But
watch the Clone Wars. That dude is exuding confidence.
He's not though. He's hiding the fact that he's hiding the fact that he has doubt.
But here's the thing, guys. We're overlooking the greatest clue that we have, and that's the fact that Sidious is short for insidious, which is slow, careful, an evil that you don't notice. It builds up over time.
Little bit of suggestions at a time.
And I think that's exactly how he did it. I think it was these long-lasting mind tricks. And I think by the time Anakin gets up to the top, I don't even think Anakin's in full control of himself. He's been so brainwashed by Palpatine that he didn't have a choice.
Yeah, and I also think that's what killed a lot of his, the power drop-off you see from Darth Vader from episode 3 all the way to episode, 6, the massive power drop-off. And to me, Palpatine constantly using suggestion on him plays a part into that. Eventually, his own mind just kind of starts to deteriorate because he's not using his own reflexes. He's not using his own intuition. He's just constantly being berated by these suggestions.
And here's the thing. I think, specifically, when you look at Anakin during the Clone Wars, when Anakin had a weak moment, when he was vulnerable, right? Palpatine managed to take all of Anakin's confidence and work his way into his weakness. Because Anakin's weakness was always fear. He was worried about his mom. He was worried about Padme. He was worried about the future. Dude basically had crazy anxiety. And so whenever you are mixing, I'm the chosen one, I can do no wrong, everything's easy, confidence, with I don't know what's coming or if I can handle it, fear.
Someone in
That's
dire
what
need of a
Palpatine.
Xanax.
Yeah, that's what Palpatine used. He took Anakin's fear, which was buried deep underneath his personality, and brought it to the forefront. And he had him by the short and curlies at that point, because that's where Anakin's vulnerability was.
Because
And
to me,
he
like he didn't lack confidence, and he didn't lack bravery either. He was like super brave in that regard. But yeah, like there are certain fears that you can play off of, and I don't think it damaged his like actual confidence. But I think the constant like suggestion, Palpatine just
Palpatine made him
gaslit.
bipolar.
Yeah, he just gaslit Anakin.
Well, I mean, he kind of did, because he had Anakin convinced
because he didn't
that Padme
believe.
was going to die.
Because he didn't really believe. Like, all of it was just a farce. Sorry, I'll always think that. It was all just a farce. He did it all just to make people, because he just doubted himself so much. That's why he acted that way. Because
I just don't
especially after
see
his
that
mom
so
died.
much. When
So,
like
I am going to yank the
super
reins just a
confident
little
little
bit.
kid. Yeah, we got wild.
Because we are running a
topic.
little long.
We're running out of time.
All right, so we've covered the Jedi. We covered what caused the Separatist event. We have Palpatine basically playing chess against himself using a galaxy-large chessboard here, right? We have the Jedi-Sith war, all the way up through till we have the Imperial military might. And I really think that the biggest, and I guess I'm going to close on this thought. I've said it 1,000 times during this episode already. I think the largest problem with technology in Star Wars, as a whole, whether you're Old Republic, New Republic, whatever, that's a stagnation of 90% of all technology.
Oh,
it
for
works,
sure.
and so we just keep doing it that way forever.
Mm-hmm.
There are exceptions, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, there's little change in any of the blasters, like really from what you look at, besides like design choices, maybe some efficiency, but it's still just a blaster.
Yep.
You look
Well,
at
I mean, even the TIE Defender and the crazy good, starfighters that we see are just modifications to an existing structure.
So yeah, I would agree to that 100. You really want to see one that didn't change at all, and that's land speeders. Look at the single person like bike speeders. Zero change from the High Republic era to the modern.
Yep.
Other than maybe a handful of design flaws. The
they were
basic
the exact
design
same
is
way
still the same.
10,000 years ago in the Old Republic.
Right.
Same thing.
Yeah, how 40K where technology
how
just
very
hasn't moved
40K.
on. We have to do like a 40K lore video at some point. I have so much to say about the
In any case, guys,
Demonculaba.
before we get out of here, I wanted to hear from everybody. We've had a lot of good chat from Michael. Thanks for joining us live.
Hi, Mike.
I'm gonna do the whole call to action thing for you guys one more time. We are beholden to the algorithm, same as any content creator. So if you like what you're hearing, you want us to keep coming back, give us a like, give us a share, and more importantly, hit us up in the comments. We want to know what you think. We want to know what you want to see. We want to know your take on our opinions. So help us out. Do the algorithm stuff. Even if you keep us muted in the back, just do the algorithm stuff.
Yeah, just let it run. But with all of that, we're going to bring this episode to a close. We are crossing the Nerdverse. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. I will do Clark's part and say, what does she do? Use.
See you guys.
Bye.